Hey, what's up? It's me, Lex, back at you with another Starfinder video. Today I'm going to do an overview of the Solarian class, which I have seen in play and have played with a fair amount at this point, so it's no longer going to be first impressions videos. The Solarian is Starfinder 2nd Edition's sort of martial combatant, and that's actually interesting and somewhat unique because in Starfinder 2nd Edition, guns are so strong and ubiquitous that I would say almost every character is having dexterity as their key or secondary stat, so that they can take advantage of using firearms at range. Combat usually happens at range, and so Solarian is unique in their ability to get in close. Not that any other class can't do that, particularly Soldier is the other class that is, I would say, good at it, and Operative kind of loses a fair amount of what makes them function, but they can also hold their own. Solarian's key attribute is Strength, and they have 10 hit points plus their Constitution modifier, so they're kind of like a full martial in this regard. The core idea of the Solarian is you are attuned to either gravitons, which is like gravity stuff, photons, which is like fire and sun, like solar, supernova, etc., or you're somewhere in the middle, alternating between them. And you take advantage of that to manifest weapons out of those sort of characteristics you embody that you wield to great destruction. You also have some solar armor and a solar flare that stays around you that you can kind of whiz out for short-range ranged attacks. So, when we get into their initial proficiencies, they start out expert in perception, so they can go pretty quick in combat, as well as reflex and will, but only trained in fortitude, so they're a little easier to knock down with poisons and such. They are trained in athletics, and then one or more skills dependent on your subclass, your stellar arrangement, and then a number of additional skills equal to 3 plus your intelligence modifier. So they're not lacking in skills, and particularly with Starfinder having 2 additional skills more than Pathfinder, I think that this is a solid amount, and will still probably feel like you aren't very diverse in your skills unless you invest into intelligence. Attacks simple and martial and unarmed. Defenses light, medium, and unarmored. And then you are trained in your class DC. Solarian uses their class DC quite a bit, and it actually got errataed in one of the errata passes, I believe, to come a little bit earlier. So if I bring this up here, there we go. It's my Google sheet that I use. I've maintained and put in here, this is how the Solarian's save DC appears against the average save bonus against a same level creature across the game. It's the 3rd best, just below Soldier, who has the best class DC, and Witch Warper, who has the 2nd best. Witch Warper just gets expert a little earlier than Solarian, but other than that, they stay the same. Now, they have a stellar attunement. At any given time, a Solarian is considered either graviton attuned, photon attuned, or unattuned. Many of your abilities have additional effects based on your current attunement, and some abilities swap your state to the other. The default state of attunement you have is dictated by your stellar arrangement, your subclass, because it is based around graviton, photon, or unattuned. And in encounter mode, you can use the attune action here once per round to reattune to a different phase. In exploration mode, the attunement control activity allows you to ensure you are in constant control of what state of attunement you begin combat in, regardless of your favorite attunement. So once per round as a concentrate action, you can switch to any attunement you wish, become attuned if you are currently unattuned, and manifest any of your solar manifestations if they are currently dormant and you have the free hands to use them. You can also use it as a free action when you roll initiative. And then in exploration mode, attunement control, the activity, allows you to, when you attune as a free action when you roll initiative, you can select your attunement regardless of your stellar arrangement's favored attunement. So we move down into the solar manifestations here. So these are all of the different things that you can manifest when you use the attune action. Solar flare, which is a small mode of solar power hovering around you. You can use it for short-ranged attacks. As a single action with the attack trait, make a ranged strike against the AC of a creature in range, using your strength modifier for the damage roll, but not for the attack roll, which has led to some difficulty in several instances where the solar shot should definitely be using the same attribute that your other attacks are on. And then the effect and range are dependent on the type. So Graviton does a d8 of bludgeoning, but it's only a 15-foot range, not a range increment, a range. On a critical success, you can attempt a trip using your athletics, even if you don't have a free hand or are not adjacent. This is not great in our games because of the fact that you've already incremented your map by using Solar Shot. It has to critically hit, it doesn't bypass map, and it increments it on its own. So after you use this, you'll be at your maximum multiple attack penalty regardless of the result, and you're tripping at a -5. But it is still a ranged trip, which isn't to be written off as long as it can be a little bit more reliable or maybe valuable. Photon Attuned gives you a d6 of fire with a 30-foot range, and on a critical success, the target also takes a d6 of persistent fire damage. And then every 4 levels, the damage increases for both of them by 1 die. So from 1d8 to 2d8 at level 5, 3d8 at 9, so on and so forth. So that's one of your manifestations. Your next manifestation is your Solar Nimbus. It is a layer of star stuff around your armor that kind of functions as an additional layer. It allows you to use Nimbus Surge, a reaction, when you are attuned. If you take damage from a melee attack, then if you're Graviton attuned, they have to make a Fortitude save or be pushed 5 feet away from you, and that's using your class DC. Or if you are Photon attuned, they just take fire damage equal to half your level rounded up with no save. In play, the fact that this is a complete save or suck effect on the Graviton has meant that it is not very good, particularly because you generally want creatures to be in melee range with you. So, Nimbus Surge has been somewhat underwhelming unless you're Photon attuned. And then the Solar Weapon. This is probably the most interesting part of the Solarian from a design perspective, is that the Solar Weapon is a weapon comprised of the essence of stars. It is specifically designed by you with traits, depending on what you want. When you attune, you can manifest your weapon as part of the action, and when manifesting, it appears in the free hand of your choice, unless it has the free hand trait, in which case it can manifest in any hand. It is a martial melee weapon, dealing 1d8 of your choice of bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, and you can select 2 of the following traits. Disarm, grapple, parry, sweep, versatile for any of the bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, freehand, non-lethal, shove, or trip. And alternatively, you can select the reach trait instead of 2 of the following. And then you choose its weapon group as well, from axe, club, hammer, pick, spear, brawling, flail, knife, polearm, and sword. And then as a 10-minute activity, you can reforge your solar weapon in exploration mode. And your solar weapon, finally, gains additional benefits based on your current attunement. So if you are Graviton attuned, if you successfully strike a creature, they treat all adjacent squares to where they were struck as being difficult terrain until the end of their next turn. And Photon Attune just takes additional fire damage equal to half your level rounded up, so from 1 all the way to 10. It's very interesting because this is basically a grab bag of traits. There's not a whole lot you can do here that you couldn't already do with Pathfinder weapons. They're very diverse, but it's the fact that you can have them whenever you would like them. One request that I've heard in my group and seen a fair amount is wanting the ability to, because by default it is a one-handed weapon, it would be real great to be able to get a two-handed weapon to be able to either maybe increase its damage die size or to get reach with a single other trait, something like that, maybe as a feat. But either way, you can make a very tailor-made weapon for what you want and select the damage types that you want as well. And then for your arrangement, your Solarian arrangement, your subclass, it gives you some additional benefits, which we will get into down below. So we'll scroll past all of this. There are some interesting things here, like Pensive Aggressor at level 7. This increases your perception to Master, and gives you a bonus to perception checks for initiative, +2 by default, and a +3 if you have incredible initiative. So the Solarian is going to be going very fast in combat. Now, when we get down to the Solarian arrangements, there's subclasses here. The 3 different subclasses are Balanced, which is somewhere in between Graviton and Photon. Degradant, which is all about Graviton. And Radiant, which is all about Photon. We'll start out with Balanced. This allows you to be Graviton and Photon, and choose which you have outside of combat, and when using the Attune action, you can select which attunement you wish to be. It starts you out, each of these gives you an initial revelation, which is a 2-action activity that you start out with at level 1, and then it gives you additional benefits at level 9. It'll give you a either a passive feature or a reaction. And at level 15, it'll give you another special action you can use. So, Balanced gives you Binaric Assault at level 1. As a 2-action activity with the Flourish trait, make a strike with your solar weapon and solar shot using your current multiple attack penalty for both and both at the same target. You can make them in whichever order you desire, and if an attack hits, resolve its damage and effects, then swap your attunement before resolving the other one. And it counts as 2 attacks when calculating your multiple attack penalty. If both hit, you become unattuned. At level 9, you get the Ascended Stability reaction. If an ability or effect would cause you to become unattuned as a reaction, you do not become unattuned and remain in your current attunement state. And finally, at level 15, once per 10 minutes as a 1-action activity, you can, for the remainder of your turn, if an action you take would result in a variable effect based on your attunement, determine the result of both effects. If this determination requires you to roll damage, roll damage. If it requires the target to make a save, have the target roll the save. And then once you've determined the possible effects for both states, you can choose which of the 2 you would like to occur regardless of your current attunement. So, for example, there are some effects later on, specifically in the feats, where there is a 2-action activity that does something if you're solar and does something different if you're graviton. This would allow you to set up with an action and then do the 2-action activity, and you would get to see what would happen in either, and then choose which one you want to lock in and have happen. It's pretty cool. Next up is Degradant. This is the Graviton, sort of black hole and gravity themed one. At level 1, you start out with Black Hole as a 2-action activity once per 10 minutes when you are Graviton attuned. Select any number of creatures within a 30-foot radius, so it's specific creatures that you want. You're not forced to target all foes or hit your allies or anything like that. And then each affected creature takes 1d8 bludgeoning damage and must attempt a fort save against your class DC or get pulled towards you a variable amount and possibly be knocked prone on a fail or critical failure. I've seen this be put to good use, but it also has a similar issue to the Solar Nimbus in that, the expected outcome of saving throws is always success, and so it's not very impactful when there is a success, but it's really great for crowd control, getting a lot of enemies pulled in, moving them around. You can do some very unique things as well because it's pulling, it bypasses the forced movement rules and so can drop people off of cliffs, pull them into dangerous terrain, etc. Next up is Defy Gravity at 9th level. As long as you're graviton attuned, you gain a fly speed equal to your land speed. That's all. It's decent enough. Getting a fly speed is pretty easy, and having your fly speed shut off when you use certain abilities, like for example Black Hole, it has the cycle trait which switches you to the opposite attunement, makes this a little less reliable than you would want it to be. You end up losing a lot of your kit when you take off if you are relying on this. And finally, at level 15, Greater Revelation is a Singularity ability with a 3-action activity with the Death trait and Disharmony, which means that it unattunes you. Once per hour while you are graviton attuned, you concentrate on a point within 60 feet, opening a black hole. It occupies a single 5-foot space, and creatures within its space take 10d8 void damage with a basic reflex save against your class DC. If they're dropped to 0 hit points, they're torn asunder and pulled into the Singularity, leaving nothing behind. Until the end of your next turn, the Singularity space and all adjacent squares count as an area of supernatural darkness that nothing can see through. And then creatures beginning their round within the area of darkness must succeed a basic fort save against your class DC or become slowed 1 for that round. And then the damage scales by 2d8 every other level, so at 17 and 19 it'll add another 2d8 up to a max of 14d8. It's pretty fun, definitely a satisfying ability. And I think my favorite part about it is actually the supernatural darkness, because the light can't get out, so you can't see through it at all. Finally, we have the Photon subclass, Radiant. This gives you the Supernova ability at level 1. It's a 2-action activity once per 10 minutes with the cycle trait. It allows you to choose to affect creatures in either a 15-foot or 30-foot emanation, and each affected creature takes 1d8 fire damage with a fort save against your class DC. The 30-foot option reduces the damage die size by 1 to 1d6. On a success, they are dazzled in addition to half damage, and on a failure, they are blinded in addition to full damage, each for only a round. On a critical failure, they are blinded for a minute. This can definitely swing a combat. Again, the expected outcome will be a success, but if you can get a critical failure or even a failure, it can do a lot for your side in a combat. Blinded is a very strong condition. At 9th level, you get Solar Wind. This makes it so that while you are photon attuned, you gain a plus 10-foot circumstance bonus to speed and can move through the space of a single unwilling creature each time you stride. The fact that this is circumstance is really nice because it means that Tailwind doesn't invalidate it. And being able to move through the spaces of unwilling creatures is great for mobility. Finally, at level 15, we have Big Bang, a 3-action activity with Disharmony and once per hour restriction. You bring up a 30-foot emanation that deals 10d6 fire damage with a reflex save against your class DC. You can select any number of adjacent allies to be unaffected by the blast, so you have to be close to them. On a success, it's just half damage. On a failure, it's full damage and 2d6 persistent fire. And on a critical failure, it's double damage, 46 persistent fire, and you can counteract a spell on the creature at max rank. Very interesting. I'm not entirely sure what this writer is kind of doing here. I understand that it says up here, like, reverts all things, but it feels very strange to have the writer effect not extend up into failure when it has for most of these abilities, and particularly when it's so restricted by the frequency. But either way, I think it's a lot of fun. And then we'll have to get into the feats for Solarian. So the Solarian feats are all kind of, like, I would say, magical fighter. Your feats are giving you more options to sort of make your turns more interesting, because Solarian itself, with the only things it grants you in its subclasses being these once per 10 minutes, once per hour activities, even if they're very powerful and warping on the battlefield, you're going to want other things to sort of spice up your game. You can, of course, always go for skill actions, but it's great to have some class feats as well to break up the monotony of just striking and to give you some additional options. So there are some interesting things like a recall knowledge action that gives you bonuses to strikes. Solar Shield is a very interesting feat chain where it gives you a very poor shield. I have gone through Solar Shield and I think it needs some pretty major buffs to be worthwhile using. And then Stellar Rush. This is a great activity for 2 actions. You switch to the other attunement and you get to stride twice, gaining a plus 10 foot circ bonus to your speed during these moves. And then it, as I was mentioning before, with the balanced subclass, it has variable effects depending on your attunement. So if you were to use that ability here, Graviton Attunement causes enemies within 15 feet of you to attempt a fort save against your class DC or be pulled directly towards you at the end of your stride. And Photon Attunement instead fills all of the squares you move through with solar energy that conceals creatures on opposite sides. And so you would be able to see the results of all of the saving throws and decide whether you wanted to go with that or just have the concealment. There's some other interesting things. You can gain 2 weapons, and they gain and you gain Agile and Twin to the list of weapon traits you can apply. There's Eclipse Strike, which allows you to make a melee strike, or use your Solar Shot and switch between your different attunements, as well as doing some additional things. Shattering Impact to strike with your solar weapon, increasing its damage die size, and then it breaks and you have to remake it, alongside some additional effects, Graviton and Photon, etc. So it's a lot of things like these. Then there are some more specific activities like Solar Barrage. It has the Disharmony trait, it's Flourish, so 2 action activity, you make 2 solar shots against separate targets with a -2 circ penalty. Both attacks count towards your multiple attack penalty, but it doesn't increase until after. There's a whole lot of sort of these maneuvers, action maneuvers, and then some more magical things as well. You can pick up Reactive Strike at level 4, and that's a great pickup for your class. Almost defining, I would say, particularly in a game with such heavy emphasis on ranged weaponry. As for my overall thoughts on Solarian here, I think that they are pretty solid, honestly, at this point. I think that what they mainly need is some touch-ups on some of their feats and a little bit on their features to be more reliable or maybe more usable. In the case of things like Solar Nimbus or Thermal Nimbus, for example, where pushing something away when you're a melee class, when they hit you with melee, and it's not even guaranteed, things like that, are very odd when you're in the game. It's not something you want to use. The different attunements don't feel like they're balanced very well. Graviton has a higher damage specifically on the Solar Shot, but then the Solar Shot has bonus, or if we move down here, there we go. The Solar Shot can do some persistent damage, but then when we get into the Solar Weapon, the Graviton actually does less damage because Photon is doing additional fire. Some very strange balance choices here. The Solar Shot, in addition to not using the same statistic as your Solar Weapon, because your Solar Weapon is a strength weapon, it also doesn't benefit from the Solarian crystals. Solarians use these crystals, striking and weapon potency. They absorb them into themselves to improve their solar weapon, the same way as striking and potency does in Pathfinder. but it doesn't benefit their solar shot at all. They also have some orbital Solarian crystals that allow them to add additional effects like property runes. But overall, I do think that this Solarian is able to do what they want to do. They have some magical effects, they get in close, and they throw melee, where none of the other classes are really dedicated to it. They don't support it as well as the Solarian does. Solarian is definitely supporting the melee playstyle very well. The biggest issue is just the fact that there are a lot of things that need a little bit of tuning. But other than that, I think it satisfies the concept very well. It's a very interesting class, and I think a lot of people will enjoy playing it regardless of its current issues, because at the end of the day, you can get in close to someone and hit them. So that's going to be it from me today. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe if you would like to see more, and leave me a few bucks on coffee if you'd like to keep the channel running. See ya. See ya. Thanks to my coffee supporters. Donating as a one-off donation, we have Shemitz and Tomb. And then at the few bucks support tier for monthly donations, I have Sac D, Phoenix FH, and Kizo. Thank you so much. You're what keeps this channel running, and I can't voice how much I appreciate it.